Hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Cellar TV. So what we're going to be doing today is talking about Germany. So Germany, we're just going to have a nice little rundown of Germany, basically what it's all about, and also a little bit about their Predications system, which some of you might not be familiar with, but that's the labeling system, and that's also the qualitative system that they have there in Germany. So as a bit of a quick rundown of Germany as a whole, 60% of all the wines here and all of the vines planted in Germany, of course, are white. And of course, one of the most important grape varietals, not just in the world, but most specifically in Germany, is Riesling. So this is what the majority of the wines here that I've got in front of us are made out of. So Riesling actually is 45%, or about 45% of all the plantings in Germany at the moment, which is massive. I mean, the large amount of space that Germany actually makes up as far as vineyards are concerned, that is a massive amount of Riesling. And of course, this is where most of the world's Riesling is actually found. In particular, which is kind of interesting, I think, is the Rheingau region, which is one of the largest regions in all of Germany. Actually has about 2/3 just in that one particular region, has about 2/3 of the world's Riesling just right there. So that's kind of crazy. So yes, of course, this is where the majority of the world's Riesling is actually planted. And that's absolutely fantastic. So I've managed to get, these guys are all from the same region, all from the Pfalz. But here are a few different of the main regions anyway that you should know about, and which we will talk a little bit more about in a moment. So these guys are from the Mosel. That's possibly one of the most well-known regions for Riesling and other wines and all the rest from Germany. Then we've got these guys. So this was a Klosserath, so Ansgar Klosserath from the Mosel. We've got these guys, which are Robert Viel, and these guys are from the Rheingau, as I said, which is one of the largest regions in all of the country here. And this is these guys. So this is Wittmann, and they're from Rheinhessen, so quite a smallish little region, but that's just right next to the Rheingau here. And as I said, all of these guys are from the Pfalz, but I just wanted to one, make this a little bit more symmetrical, and two, show a little bit more of the diversity as well, because Pfalz is one of the most dynamic regions in all of Germany, which is quite exciting. So we've got these guys here, which are absolutely fantastic. O'Connor Riepholz. This is one of their Rieslings. We've got a Christmann, which again, another fantastic producer from this particular region, and this is their Spätburgunder, and that's also known as Pinot Noir. Well, that is Pinot Noir. That's also known, I suppose, as Spätburgunder. And this is Müller-Catois. So Müller-Catois have long been considered one of the greatest wineries in all of the world, and they're also in the Pfalz. And so this is a little bit more of an alternative wine, which I think we're sold out of online at the moment. But this is made from the Schulberg grape. Right, so getting down more into grapes and all the rest, as I said, Riesling makes about 45% of all the countries, all of Germany's plantings and, of course, production, which is massive. And as I said, 60% of the whole is actually white, which is quite important. So, of course, Riesling is the majority of that, but being Germany, it is quite a cool climate overall, cool continental is what we would call it. And with that, it means that it's going to be really well suited to a lot of those cooler climate grape varietals. So we're starting to see quite a lot more Gewürztraminer. Of course, with a name like Gewürztraminer, you probably knew that it came from Germany originally anyway, so you're right there. So of course, Gewürztraminer being that spicy, beautiful, aromatic, rose petal and all those lovely aromatics come off Gewürztraminer there. So Riesling, Gewürztraminer, then we're getting a little bit of those other aromatics, such as Pinot Gris. That's here Pinot Gris is actually known as Grauburgunder, and so just to give that you a bit more of an idea or background to it all. And so Pinot Noir, I call it Spätburgunder here, and as I just said, Pinot Gris is known as Grauburgunder, and some of you might know Pinot Blanc, that's also planted here, that's called Blauburgunder or Blauer Burgunder. So that basically, the idea is Burgundy, they're grapes that come from the Burgundy region in France, and so Pinot Gris is traditionally planted in Burgundy, of course. We have Pinot Noir here, which is of course the main grape varietal of Burgundy, and then also Pinot Blanc was planted there as well. So then we have they've just got these little German prefixes basically to sort of tell us which ones are which. Grauburgunder being Gris, Pinot Gris, Spätburgunder being, as I said, Pinot Noir, and Blauburgunder being Pinot Blanc. So yes, we are getting those aromatic grape varietals coming out through mainly Gewürztraminer and Pinot Gris, a little bit of, as I say, Pinot Blanc, Blauburgunder, and then you start to see a little bit more of these very Germanic, and really you don't see them anywhere else actually, in quite, to be quite frank with you, around the world. And as I said, this is from Schrube, is the grape varietal here, and so this is a mix of sort of Silvaner and Riesling. Silvaner again is one of the other grape varietals here, which are planted en masse, generally speaking. These tend to be a little bit more basic, not necessarily very complex, the Silvaner wines, but they are again one of the more planted white grape varietals. And so generally speaking, red is largely, if you are going to see a red wine made in Germany, it probably is going to be made out of Spätburgunder, Pinot Noir, like this, and this is also planted in quite a few of the regions all around the country, which is quite exciting. But of course, being a cooler climate, it sort of limits you to what sort of red grapes you can actually plant there, because it's not necessarily going to be as warm and as hot and all the rest to get very, very ripe. So you're not seeing loads and loads of Grenache or Syrah or Cabernet Sauvignon being planted there anytime soon. But there are quite a few more sort of local or indigenous German grape varieties which are being planted there, red grape varieties I should say, so such as Dornfelder as well, that's quite widely planted, a little bit of Blaufränkisch, you get a little bit of Lemberger, and a few others as well. So not very well known grape varietals by any means for most people outside of Germany, but generally speaking, as I say, Pinot Noir is the most planted there. I think out of all of the red grape varietals there, Pinot Noir makes up about, I think it's about 70% of all red grapes planted there. So of course that means that's actually quite a large percentage of all the nation's plantings. I think it's about 18% of the nation's plantings is Pinot Noir now, which is very, very exciting. And of course, this has just been going up and up and up and up and up over the last 10, 20 years as things are becoming a little bit more warmer and all the rest as well. So we talked a little, well, I mentioned all the different regions before, but let's just go a little bit more further into depth into these different regions. And so we've got Mosel here. Generally speaking, if people know about Germany or people are going to talk to you about Germany, then they'll probably bring up Mosel first. Why this is it doesn't actually have the oldest and most historical vineyards in all of the country. This is actually Rheingau. We'll get onto that in a second. But Germany is actually home to the largest amount of great growths or Grosslagen sites. Well, again, that's another term which we'll get into a second. But basically, they're the Grand Crus, the best of the best of the best vineyards, have been classified here, and Mosel is home to the largest proportion of them compared to any other region, which is very, very exciting. Mosel is home pretty much to Riesling, to almost exclusively Riesling. I think it's about 90% Riesling, with a little bit of sort of, as I said, a few of those other different grape varietals which I mentioned before, such as, Gewürztraminer and a little bit of Silvaner and things like this as well. But it is largely Riesling based. There's also quite a lot of dry Riesling produced here, but generally speaking, when we think of Mosel Rieslings, we think of Cabernet, Spätlese, Auslese, and going all the way up to the, Beerenauslese and the Trockenbeerenauslese as well. So some of the sweetest wines in the world are produced here in the Mosel, which is absolutely fantastic. And we move on to Rheingau, something a little bit more warmer, generally speaking. And so Rheingau is actually where some of the first, the first, and some of the other first wineries in all of Germany were set up. These wineries, of course, were set up by monasteries, generally speaking, and they've been going on for nearly 900 years, which is rather crazy, to be quite frank with you. And that's one of the longest sort of time periods and countries, of course, now to be producing wine, and which is really, really fantastic. We don't have any here, but Schloss Johannesburg is the oldest estate in Germany, one of the oldest in the world, and they're still producing. They're still producing wine at the same estate, on the same vineyards, from the same vineyards and all the rest, which mind-blowing to me. I mean, they've been going for, as I say, nearly 900 years, which is ridiculous, absolutely and utterly ridiculous, which is very, very cool. Again, Rheingau is still Riesling predominant. I think it's about 60 to 70% Riesling, but again, we are starting to see a little bit more Chardonnay, a few of those sort of warmer, aromatic grape varietals being planted here as well as a little bit of Pinot Noir, which is quite exciting. Rheinhessen, quite a small little region, but equally exciting and equally fantastic, I think. And Rheinhessen, again, quite a warm sort of region. It has got a lot of Riesling, like most of the regions in all of Germany do, so that's a very, very common trend which you shall come across. But they are actually becoming a little bit more experimental, and a lot more of those, as I say, aromatic, especially white wine grape varietals are coming up, being planted there. Mainly sort of Pinot Gris, the Grauburgunder, a little bit of Pinot Blanc, that's Sylvaner, some Gewürztraminer, and some Chardonnay being planted there as well. So that's actually one of the more hubs of interesting sort of grape varietals. We then have Baden, which again we don't have any wines from here today, but Baden is actually seen as the red wine country out of, well, red wine region out of the country anyway, and this is where majority of the top Pinot Noirs are actually being made at the moment in Germany, which is quite exciting. And so that's quite a warm and the most southerly region as well in all of Germany. And so if we know of Alsace, which is just on the other side of the border in France, Alsace, which is also home to things like sort of Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris and things like this, in as I say, in the north of France, right along the border, with the Vosges Mountains running down the middle between the two of them as the border between France and Germany. This being France, I suppose, and this being Alsace, and this being Baden. So Baden's literally right next door. So it just sort of carries on there, and of course, being more southerly, it is warmer, and this is why Pinot Noir is planted there quite predominantly. So we go north, a little bit north, and moved over a little bit, and then we come to Pfalz. And as I said, we've got 3 different producers here, and they're producing completely different grapes, which is absolutely exciting. And I have to say, for me, Pfalz is probably one of my more favoured, more excited by sort of regions in all of the country, because in my view, it's one of the more sort of experimental, one of the more sort of, well, I don't know, it's just exciting sort of region. As I said, so we've got a Riesling from these guys. There's quite a large amount of Pinot Noir being produced here, and so A. Christmann, again, one of their more fantastic sort of producers of Pinot Noir, Spätburgunder, from the region. And as I said, this is one of my absolute favourite wines in the world, to be quite frank with you, the Schrubert Spätlese from Moller-Cartois. So Schrubert is a crossing between Riesling and Sylvaner, which was one of the other sort of additional grape varietals which I mentioned before. And it is just zesty, grapefruity, pink grapefruity. It's delicious. Absolutely delicious. So that's a real hotbed of all sorts of other things. There are a few other regions such as Ahr and sort of Württemberg and all the rest, but they are quite small, or sort of secondary as far as things are concerned. But those are the top sort of 5 regions which you should know about as far as Germany is concerned. And of course, as far as all the grapes are concerned as well. So let's talk a little bit now about a few of the, well, there's 2 main classifications that you need to know about if you're really wanting to understand German wines. One of them is a vineyard classification, and the other is a sort of wine quality classification as well. So there's one group that you need to be absolutely aware of, which is called the VDP, which is short for, and most people just call it the VDP because it is quite a long name, but it is short for the Verband or Deutsche Prädikatsweingüter. So the VDP was actually a collection of sort of the top wine growers in all of the country, and so this isn't a governmental grouping or anything like this. So they literally just came together and they wanted to basically promote the best of the best of the best sort of wines and promote the sort of the best winemaking and viticultural practices and all the rest, to try and combat some of the bad press that German wines, in particular German Rieslings and things like Liebfraumilch, used to get, which was back in the 60s, 70s and 80s. So they basically wanted to try and revolt against that and say, actually no, we do make some of the best wines in the absolute world, which they completely and utterly do. Not going to lie there at all. So the first one is the VDP's classification of vineyards. So we've got 4 steps essentially. We start of the pyramid. So if we're going up, on the very, very bottom, we start off with the Gutswein. So Gutswein, these are basically the entry-level wines. Some from sort of everyday vineyards, as it were. So nothing too special. They come from regions, but they can also be blended between regions as well, these Gutsweins. And then on top of that, we have Ortsweins. So Ortswein sort of vineyard slots or plots. And these have to come from vineyards that are actually from the producers or owned by the producers that are part of the VDP, otherwise they're not going to be classified as part of the VDP. And also something else that we should notice whilst we are going through this is the VDP. You'll notice on all of these sort of wine label, these capsules and all the rest, there's this little eagle here with the sort of the 6 dots in the pyramid there, right in the middle. That is the VDP signature and sort of logo icon, if you will, and so look out for the producers that have that on there, because generally speaking right away you're going to say and know that they are some of the top producers in there in the country, which is quite exciting. And also it will tell you whether it's an Ortswein or Gutswein, or if it's an Erstlagen or a Grosslagen site as well, so that's important to know. So wines made under the Ortswein classification, vineyard classification, also have to be planted with a particular grape varietal that is for that particular region. So Riesling is one of the classifying grape varietals in the Mosel. Well, it's actually one of the classifying grape varietals in all of the country, but for instance a Pinot Noir in the Mosel wouldn't be able to be part of the VDP just because it's not one of the classifying grape varietals for that particular region, whereas it is, for instance, as you can see here, Spätburgunder, it is in Pfalz, because it is recommended, one of the recommended grape varietals for the Pfalz, because it is warmer and etc. So then we move up to the Erstlagen. So the Erstlagen are known as the first class vineyards, and these are said to have some unique characteristics. This can be sort of the whole terroir thing is coming up into it now. So these unique vineyards are very, very special because they've got certain sort of soils, or they're certain sort of slopes. Now up the slope or at the bottom of the slope, or whatever that might be. So it's largely going to be sort of as I say, sort of soil conditions or sort of climatic conditions and all the rest, which are then seen over time as being some of the better sites, because they're going to be getting more riper grape varietals, or grapes I should say, and then producing riper and better wines, more age-worthy wines as well. So that's going to be something that's going to play into those particular sites. And then on top of that, at the very, very, very top of the pyramid there, quality pyramid of the vineyards, we've got Grosslagen. So Grosslagen are the top of the top of the top. So basically, I mean, sort of like that, in the way that if you think of the classic French system, you've got the Premier Cru, or you've got like the Village wines, and those are going to be wines from sort of your Ortswein sort of vineyards, and then you're moving up, and you're going to have the Premier Cru, and that's going to be your Erstlagen, so still very, 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 very good and quite rare to come across, generally speaking. And then top of the pyramid, which is very, very, very rare, and the absolute best wines in, well, Burgundy anyway, which is sort of the system I'm trying to talk about now in contrast. And then you've got the Grosslagen, which is the equivalent of the French Grand Cru, basically, the top of the top of the top. And so these wines are very, very small parcels of the greater Erstlagen, generally speaking, well, usually anyway. And so these particular wines are going to have very, very specific conditions as far as the soil is concerned, sort of the mineral content of that soil, the particular aspect it's going to have on the slope, and etc. and etc. And so these particular vineyards, well, both the Erstlagen and the Grosslagen sites, have been claimed out by the members of the VDP as being the best of the best of the best. And this isn't just them saying, well, my vineyards are better than yours, so they should be called a Grosslagen or something like that. It's not at all. It's complete and utter consensus due to sort of historical proof, basically, which I think is probably is the best way to sort of do that. So that's how they do that. So just a quick run over there again. You've got the entry-level wines. These are the Gutswein. Then you've got the Village wines, as it were. This is the Ortswein, or the Ortswein. So all of these have to be planted with a particular grape varietal, which is specific and a recommended grape varietal to the region. And then up again, you're going to have of the pyramid. Up again, you're going to have the Erstlagen. So these are sort of the Premier Cru sites, if you will. And moving up again to the very, very, very top, very, very few vineyards have got this classification. They are the Grosslagen sites. So yes, and as you can see here, for instance, this has got the VDP Grosslagen logo along here, and this is the VDP Erstlagen vineyard. And I don't think we have any Ortswein vine. No, these are, again, and see he's got Urslagen along there. No, they're all best. They're all some of the best. And GG is another thing which you should know about as well. So GG is Großgewach. Großgewach, that's dry white, or generally speaking it's going to be a Riesling, but a dry wine made from a Grosslagen site. So in here, for instance, they've got this embossed GG on the label, and it'll also say down here, so Riesling GG. So that means it's a dry wine made from that particular thing. Right, so that was the vineyard classification, and then we're moving on purely into the other VDP's classification of setup, which is purely the Predications system. So this system is doing and dealing, I should say, exclusively with the wines themselves. And so this is where you're going to see other terms such as, well, we don't actually have it here. We've got things like fine herb here. We've got Riesling Trocken, and of course things like the Spätlese title down here. So this is where the Predications system comes into it. Predications is dealing with, well, talking generally speaking about sweetness levels. So to begin with, we've got Trocken. Trocken equals dry. We're talking about an off-dry wine. This is a Halb Trocken, off-dry or half-dry, as it were. And then this is also equivalently known as fine herb, which is interesting because we've got that down here. So this is a fine herb, which equals off-dry. So a little bit of sweetness. Right, so that is the typical, those are words that can be sort of associated with any particular producer's wines in the whole entire country, which is important to note because the VDP, as I mentioned before, well, in one of our other videos as well, I mentioned before that the VDP is a group of producers, the top producers in all of the country, but not all of them, of course. There's only a few hundred. So that's important to note. So not every single wine is going to be named and labelled with the VDP thing. Only these particular top producers will. And of course with that they're not always going to be known as cabinet and etc. So anyway, so starting off, again this is going to be a sort of like a pyramid system. So we're starting off at the bottom. We've got cabinet. Cabinet is between dry and off-dry. Then we're moving up to Spätlese. Spätlese wines are going to be a little bit more fuller bodied, a little bit more richer. These will tend to be off-dry, well, at least off-dry, and then they will tend to be varying towards medium dry, so a little bit more sweeter again. Then we've got Auslese, and so Auslese, they're going to be, generally speaking, they're going to be influenced by either late harvest and a little bit of botrytis grapes, so grapes that have got noble rot on them as well. And so they're going to be, again, sweeter still, so Auslese wines, they're going to be between well, they're going to be, generally speaking, medium dry to sweet, or at least medium sweet. And then we're moving on to Beerenauslese, and so these are going to be sweet. These are going to have a lot of botrytis influence into them. And then top of the pyramid there is TBA, or Trockenbeerenauslese, and these wines are the sweetest and lushest of them all. So, and again, also some of the most sweetest wines in all of the world, which is very exciting. So basically, how they become sweeter and sweeter and sweeter and sweeter is because as the further we go up the triangle, the pyramid, the further we go up the pyramid, the more likely there is to have a late harvest sort of influence, and as I said, also a botrytis or noble rot influence as well in the grapes, which means that they're going to become sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. Now, what's important to note about this is also, I mean, as well as being a sweetness sort of indicator for consumers, this is also showing that there is much higher quality going into it. So the VDP producers and their wines, and when we're talking about the Predications system, they have very specific things. So there's no machine harvesting at all. This is all hand harvest, So generally speaking, it's going to be higher quality as well. So you're with machine harvesting, just as a slight aside, with machine harvesting you are likely to get other things like leaves and twigs and all the rest all chucked into the big vat, and then that can be fermented in the wine themselves, not removed, that is. So fermented in the wines themselves, and that can start to give off flavors, so that's not good. Whereas of course with people that are hand harvesting, they're only going to be picking grape bunches out, so that's important. Anyway, slight aside there. But And then the higher we go up into sort of the Auslese, Beerenauslese and Trockenbeerenauslese, since these guys are dealing with and wanting to create sweet wines, that is very much the goal, they are going through the vineyard quite a few different times to make sure that they're only picking grapes or bunches which have been affected by botrytis or noble rot, in order to make the sweetest and the sweetest of wine. So generally speaking, a Trockenbeerenauslese wine, which we don't have any examples of right here, that's going to be something where the pickers, they're going through the vineyard, they would have gone through the vineyard up to 8-10 times or something like that, just often picking individual botrytis influenced or infected berries. So it's a very, very long and exhaustive process, but with that you're producing and getting to drink some of the most incredibly sweet and interesting and complex wines in the world. So this is been a bit of a rundown about the Predications vine system, as well as a bit of a rundown overall in Germany and how their wines are sort of produced. Actually, before we go, I'm just going to mention, just to confuse you even further, as I said, so Trocken equals dry, and you've got all these different things. You've got Cabernet and Spätlese and all the rest. You can have wines which are picked at the Spätlese or the Cabernet sort of level, or even the Auslese and all the rest. But Spätlese is often quite a common one anyway. You can have grapes that are picked at the Spätlese, so more riper, more sweeter, generally speaking, but definitely much more riper. Must wait, as it were. These grapes are going to be much more sort of, or produce wines which are much more complex. So you can pick wines that are at the Spätlese level, the sugar level, and then you can ferment them till dry. So that means that the resulting wines are going to be much more fuller in body, generally speaking slightly higher in alcohol, but still only about 14%, which isn't crazy, but they will be dry. So if you do that, then this is what we would call a Spätlese Trocken. Which again is just something, I mean, it's a slight aside, but you do come across it. So if you're ever wondering, because I've just gone and told you that Spätlese equals sweet, or at least sweeter, and then Trocken equals dry, so why in the world? And there's two completely clashing ideas. So that's the idea. So people can then pick like Auslese grapes, which are really, really ripe, really, really intense, very, very complex sort of flavors there, which would, if they fermented in a normal sort of way, would produce a sweet wine, a very sweet wine, as well as being quite complex and aromatically. But if they wanted to, they could ferment that till dry, call it an Auslese Trocken, and that would just be a very, very intense, dry, often a Riesling. So that's that. And in wrapping up, so this has been Germany for you. Basically, this has been a nice little rundown talking about the different sweetness levels, talking about the different sorts of vineyards and all the different grapes and regions that Germany has to offer. So I highly, highly recommend that you go off and try a bunch of German wines, because they are absolutely fantastic. They are cooler climate, which means they are going to have a little bit higher acidity and things like this as well, which means that they can be perfectly matched with summer, just because they are a little bit more refreshing, a little bit more lively, a little bit more vibrant. So as I say, highly, highly, highly recommend Germany as a wine producing country, and all of the wines that we have up online, just so you know, which we do have a link down there below for you, to our website, and to all our German wines are absolutely, utterly fantastic, and are regarded as some of the best producers in Germany to date, which is very exciting. So I've been Connal, this has been the Cellar TV. Cheers.